Today I'm interviewing former teacher, stockbroker, and now YouTuber Independent Man. I am Matthew Roebuck. I'm here with Independent Man, who's an independent YouTuber. Hello, Independent Man.
How you doing?
Yeah, really good. Now, how would you actually describe your channel to someone who's never heard of it?
I guess if you're familiar with YouTube, there's something called the anti-social justice, anti-feminist, perhaps skeptic community is another word is used. I probably wouldn't use any of those labels myself because I think it's much more eclectic than that. But there definitely are some sort of genres, if you like, especially the anti-feminist one, which I don't do a lot on myself. But you probably know some of them, in the genre of, say, Bearing or Undoomed, those type of people. But I'm in that general area of anti-social justice, if you like, anti-PC, anti-authoritarian.
Yeah, fantastic. So who would you say that your target audience actually is?
Well, it's the thing, when you start a channel, you don't really know, because you think, who's going to listen to what I've got to say? You just don't know if you're going to get any traction or what. I can tell you who my audience actually is.
Yeah.
According to the Google Analytics demographics, 60% or maybe 2/3 are below the age of 35. Yeah. So, and I'm older than that myself. Now it's surprising and not surprising. It's not surprising because most of the people online tend to be younger. Most of the people who still get their news from TV tend to be in their 60s.
Yeah.
So that's not surprising, but it is good from my perspective that what I am saying is resonating with young people, because often you see this, I don't know, millennials get a lot of crap as being, oh, that's a terrible generation, they're horrible, they're lost, they're entitled, they're all this kind of stuff. But there's plenty of millennials that aren't like that, I think, and there's plenty that are realizing that they don't want to grow up in this censored world where humor is gone and you can't say what you think because you'll be censored.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'd definitely put myself in that category. So you mentioned you're a little bit older. So why did you actually start your YouTube channel? So I mean, it is more of a millennial thing to do. So why did you actually start it in the first place?
Well, I think, I'm halfway through my life, and I didn't just want to. I'd been living overseas for 15 years. I came back in February of 2016, and I didn't just want to go and get another job and just work for somebody else and do something that I made a comfortable living from, but that I didn't really feel passionate about. I mean, the reason I left my last job, which was in academia, and it was easy, and I wasn't challenged, and I was bored. And a lot of people would say, well, that's a nice problem to have. You've got a nice lifestyle there. You're paid decent. You have, you don't want for anything. You can afford to go on holidays. You get 3 or 4 months off a year. What else do you want? Well, I think you can just sort of, it's kind of a case of be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
You think that's an easy life, but actually you don't. When it comes down to it, when you don't really have any goals or drive in your life, it becomes quite boring. So when I came back to Australia, I didn't just want to fall into that again. And I had a bit of savings behind me because I'd saved a bit of money, and I thought, well, I'm going to buckle down and see if I can make a go of this YouTube thing. I have no idea if I can do it, but let's just put some stuff out there. And I thought when I looked around at the community, if you like, I know people don't like using community, but this sort of anti-social justice crowd, I thought, what differentiates myself? What can I do that's different? And I would say that the only thing that I thought I had an edge on was bringing a more sort of statistical analysis to problems, analyzing actual evidence instead of just the rhetorical arguments, sort of making evidence-based arguments, using research, using statistics.
Excellent. So without giving too much away about your actual identity, I mean, I do understand if you want to remain anonymous. What is your background from before you got into YouTube?
Well, I'm probably not going to be anonymous for much longer because I'm going to be on a panel at a conference next month.
Oh, fantastic.
Friedman Conference next month in Sydney, the Friedman Libertarian Conference. So that'll be my grand coming out. So I won't be anonymous for much longer. So my background is basically I grew up in country New South Wales. I went to university there. I left, as soon as I graduated, I pretty much left and went to Sydney, and I worked in accounting, was bored shitless, got into the stockbroking game, which was very interesting at the time. So I was there through the whole .com crisis, the .com blow up in the late 90s. And then the early 2000s, I became quite disillusioned by it all. I was only in my mid-20s. And I just packed up and I'd been around Southeast Asia a few times, and became really interested in Buddhism. I ended up going to Thailand teaching English for 10 grand a year. And I spent my time off in monasteries and things, learning meditation and stuff. I didn't shave my head or become a monk or anything. I just learned that stuff. So I was there for a couple of years. Then I kind of did that, and I thought, right, I've got that now. But I wasn't ready to just stop life at age 28 or whatever I was, 29, and become a monk. And then I just kept on with the teaching thing. And again, the teaching was not a passion, but it was a good way to see the world. And so I ended up in Japan for almost 13 years teaching. I did a master's degree in that time, and I got some university positions, got promoted up through the ranks. And but eventually, I mean, I'm not an academic, and I never was, and it's just not where I belong.
Yeah, fair enough. So how long have you actually been on YouTube for? Like, when did you actually found your channel?
Oh, well, it's not quite a year yet. So I put out my first video on 30th of March last year. That was my first video. And I guess I didn't really get serious about putting out regular content probably till a couple of months later, probably May. But yeah, it'll be a year at the end of this month.
Oh, fantastic. Well done. So to get 26,000 subscribers in 1 year is quite an achievement.
Yeah, I mean, it exceeded. I thought when I started March, if I could get 10,000 by Christmas, I'd be doing well. I got 20,000 by Christmas, and
fantastic.
So that was good. But there's people that start channels and they get 100,000 people in 6 months. It just depends.
Yeah, it all depends on the content and whether or not people value it. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, and I think there's. It depends more on the audience, and what's popular is not necessarily good, and what's good is not necessarily popular.
Yeah, excellent. So with your channel, what are your goals? Like, where do you see your channel in 5 years, and what do you actually want to achieve with it, other than obviously generating that basic income? So outside of the income and subscribers and all that kind of thing, what do you actually want to do with your channel? Like, where do you want to take it?
Yeah, well, I think I don't want to just be a reactionary voice. So I don't just want to be someone who sees something dumb from the social justice crowd and then comments on it, and that's it, throws it out in the ether. I think I would like to get more involved, whether that's politically, whether that's organizing in a campaign, political campaign, or just not even organizing people around issues like 18C and the repeal of it, or the amendment of it, or something like that. Maybe doing something like what Jonathan Haidt is doing in the United States with his Heterodox Academy, which is ranking, because I think universities are, and I don't know which university you're at, but I think universities are a big part of the problem. There is no, whilst they preach diversity, the one diversity that actually counts, which is viewpoint diversity, they don't have. They're all sort of lean hard left most of the time.
Well, so I definitely agree with that. I don't know how much of this my teachers are actually going to listen to, but they are all definitely of the left. One is out and proud, very hard left
Yeah.
in all our views, and I find it like I am an outspoken non-leftist,
Mm.
and I've basically taken the strategy this year of just, all right, I'm going to keep my mouth shut, do the work, do the best that you can for the year, head down, and just learn as much as I can, rather than speaking out against them and getting into a slangy match with them. So I definitely agree that there is a bit of a, you know, that one-sided monotony to the ideas that come out of university. I mean, I could talk about that forever. Just to move on, what do you see yourself in relation to the mainstream media? Like, so how would you describe yourself in contrast to them?
Well, I think you have to. I don't know how long you've got, but I think the problem with the mainstream media is that the idea of objective journalism seems to be an old-fashioned idea.
Yeah.
And I think you can trace this back. A lot of people sort of say, well, this started to happen around 2000, around the internet, when newspaper circulation started to die, and they realized, and they were very slow to realize this, because I was in stock market at that time. And I can tell you that the media analysts, there was a lot of denial with the media companies. They thought, oh, this internet, yeah, it's a thing, but we don't have to pay too much attention to it. A lot of them were very slow. And even today, you can see that a lot of online publications, like even the Huffington Post, is having trouble. I think their readership is going down. And there's only a few sort of successful papers that are doing it well online through subscriptions. But I would go back further than that and say cable TV was a problem. And I'm talking about in the 80s in the United States, and you had all of a sudden you had a rise in sensationalized journalism, right? Just to get views, because now the media landscape is so much more competitive. And so I think one of the great sort of hullabaloos of the late 70s, early 80s was in the United States was this epidemic of children being abducted by, kiddie fiddlers. And there wasn't actually an epidemic of it. There were a few very high profile cases, but then the media blew it out of all proportion. And then now that leads to the helicopter parents. And then you have the millennial coddled generation, which is, I'm getting off topic, but you can go back that far to see the media starts to sensationalize. And so today you have, you can see this playing out straight away in the media, that they've left objective journalism behind. They're very ideological. It's about clickbait headlines. It's about it's quote mining, taking, just a paragraph or a sentence, even a phrase out of context, portraying it as something that it isn't, misrepresenting statistics. I mean, it's hilarious to me that the left has come out with the notion of fake news, and now it's been used against them because, I mean, if you think about what feminism puts out, what feminism has put out for the last 10 to 15 years is all fake news.
Yeah.
Rape, we live in a rape culture. Domestic violence is an epidemic that permeates all through society. It isn't. It's an epidemic perhaps in Australia in Aboriginal communities, but, and poor underclass communities, or the wage gap. I mean, it doesn't get any more fake news than that. So they've gotten away from the old-fashioned objective journalism, presenting the facts, and you separate your editorial and your opinion from your fact-based journalism. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. They still have opinion columns, but it's all mixed up, and I think the public, either consciously or unconsciously, or both, probably both, have picked up on this, because if you have a look at the ratings, the trust in the media. I think in 1976 in the United States, I think the public approval rating of mainstream media outlets was something like 75%. And it's lost a percentage point for every year since 1976. So it's down 40 percentage points. It's like in the low 30s. Something like that.
Yeah, I knew that it was quite low. I didn't know that it actually dropped off that quickly. It's interesting. You sort of bring up the point of journalism has lost its objectivity. So, just to provide an example, I don't know if you saw what was going on in Melbourne. The Melbourne Council has decided to change half the green men with green women. Now, now personally, like if you look at that on its surface, green men with green women, who cares? But it's the fact that it's the shoving of the political agenda down people's throat and saying, well, you have to accept this. We got to stop unconscious bias in inverted commas. Now, there was a story about this. They wrote about it in the ABC, and this was kind of put up as the objective news reporting, all that kind of thing, as this was what a calm, rational approach to it was. Now, I read the article, and within the article, it sort of brushed over the fact that this was a controversy, got two people that thought it was a great idea, and that was it. And it's like, that's, in my mind, that's editorializing, because it's not actually showing the full picture. The controversy and the fact that people were talking about it and disagreeing it was a story, and they sort of brushed over the fact that it was in disagreement and sort of presented this picture of, well, everyone agrees and only a few people disagree, and that's it. Now, yeah.
And look at the basis of see what else needs to be pulled apart. There is here is another piece of received wisdom that is now fact according to the left. Unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've done one of those IAT tests.
I'd never even heard of unconscious bias until I read about it last week.
Well, basically, it's this: you take a test, and they flash up faces and they flash up words, and so they'll have words like evil, bad, and if you're quicker to associate a black face to the bad words than a white face, then this indicates some kind of unconscious bias. The problem is that this test is not highly replicable. Even the person who invented the test says that even if it shows that you have some unconscious bias, that it doesn't mean you're racist. And that these bias tests can also apply to so it's male, female, race, gender, sexuality. There's all different types of tests you can take. But the point is, unconscious. Who cares what your unconscious bias is if it doesn't manifest in behavior? And that's the point. If it doesn't manifest it in behavior, it doesn't actually matter. That's the real point, because who cares? I mean, essentially, this is Minority Report. You're being convicted of thought crime. So this whole unconscious bias thing doesn't add up. And I've got a video on this if you want to look at my channel. I think it's called Non-Problems Unconscious Bias. And not only that, is that the research on unconscious bias training, you can get unconscious bias training, which is happening in universities, is that it's having the opposite effect. There is a grand, a meta-analysis of all these unconscious bias training programs, and they find that there's actually no difference, no change in anyone's behavior, except some people become more biased according to these tests. Because what happens is, let's say, you don't consider yourself a racist person, you just think you give everybody a fair go, like most people do, and then you get told that you're actually racist and you've got these biases and you need to do something about it. See, people get pissed off and then they rebel against it, and they sort of like get a fuck you attitude towards it. I don't know if I can say that on your show.
We can edit it out if we need to.
Yeah. Well, they display a sort of rebellious attitude towards this training because they resent the fact that they're being called biased. And so it has the opposite effect.
Yeah. Well,
and so none of this has any basis at all. So the person who created the test at Harvard University says very clearly that if you have unconscious bias, it doesn't mean you're racist. And by the way, what you'll actually often find is that black people who take the test have bias against other black people. So they're racist against themselves. Because the left, it's always portrayed as white people against everybody else, men against women, It's the same narrative. And I guess that's one of the problems, and one of the things that should be mentioned here is that the left has grasped onto identity politics. And so anything that doesn't adhere to that narrative, they either don't report or they downplay it. So you brought up news. What about the recent story about Kaiser Trad, who basically said He was on Andrew Bolt's Bolt Report, and he said, and Andrew Bolt asked him about the invocation in the Quran to beat your wife, and he basically defended that by saying, well, what it is it's a last resort. So you try and reason with your wife, you buy her chocolates, you buy her flowers, you do all you can, but so beating is a last resort. Now, ABC's own Media Watch, Media Watch is on Monday nights, came out and said not one paper, Fairfax paper, reported it, and no one on the ABC reported it. Now, this is condoning domestic violence. Now, what the left is like about domestic violence. They flip out at anything. They'll flip out at Eddie Maguire for making a joke about holding a woman's head underwater. But here's a man on TV saying that domestic violence is sort of condoned by the Quran, and it's only a last resort, and not one person in the left media even mentioned it.
Exactly. Not a single person. I mean, that is newsworthy. That is definitely newsworthy, and
absolutely
stunning. This isn't. I don't think it's editorializing to say that that's something that should be mentioned in the news. That a leading voice within the Muslim community has condoned domestic violence, especially as you say. There's such a big anti-domestic violence campaign going on at the moment, and this man has actually condoned it and said yes, it is justified within his belief system, and no one's even brought it up as an issue like this. I mean, you can say things like this all day, in that if this was a white Catholic male saying that yes, I beat my wife, and yes, I believe that's okay, and the Bible justifies it, this would be a mainstream story for weeks. Yeah, but he's a Muslim leader, and it doesn't really get a mention. I mean, it got a mention on Media Watch, which is fun, which is good. I didn't actually see that episode. I'm supposed to watch them, but
that was last week. You can probably find it online. But I mean, good on him for calling it out. He called out his own station for doing it.
That's correct.
I mean, he's half decent. I mean, he leans left as well, but he's half decent. He'll call out the bullshit. Yeah, usually.
Excellent.
But I mean, it's just another reflection of, look, that guy's a Muslim. Well, Muslims are under identity politics. Muslims are a protected identity group.
Yes,
you can't criticize them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So, in that regards, do you feel like journalism as a profession, like the mainstream media, they've failed in their journalistic duty, especially over the last sort of 10 years, but as you mentioned, even before that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to say that the whole, it's a not all argument. It's not everybody, and there's good independent journalism out there. I find some good journalism in the Australian from certain writers. But in the main, yes, it's just too biased. It's a viewpoint. It's not objective. But I wouldn't say, people get negative on the journalism career, but I would say that opens up opportunities. It opens up opportunities. I probably couldn't do what I'm doing and have the type of following that I've got if the mainstream media wasn't so bad, and people are turning to YouTube and other things to get their news, which is good and bad. It's good and bad, because there's a lot of crap on YouTube as well.
Okay, so we're going quite long. I do have 3 more questions that I need to ask. So very quickly, would you describe yourself as alt-right?
No, absolutely
Excellent.
not.
So
I think
in that regard, how would you describe the alt-right? I mean, I find that it's something quite hard to define. So how would you define that? As simply as possible.
The problem with the alt-right is that people have associated themselves with it who aren't really alt-right, because it was something edgy to do to post out a Pepe meme during the presidential election, as a way to enrage social justice types. But I mean, alt-right at its core is a ethno-nationalist movement. So they basically say, look, we have these set of values in our society. They're handed down from a white European tradition, Judeo-Christian tradition, But the defining characteristic is this, and they say that only white people are welcome, right? That's the defining. Now that's the real alt-right. And like I said, I think it's been corrupted. It's corrupted is the wrong word, but it's infused with all these different, like I said, like people shit posting Pepe memes, which is. But if you ask those people and sit them down, okay, so you've had your fun doing your shit posting online, but do you really believe in a white ethno state? I'm sure a lot of them would say no. And I think someone wrote recently the other day, there was an article out saying the alt-right should go away. I believe it should too. You don't want racism associated with it. I don't believe in an ethno-national state. See, a lot of the core values of what makes America the way it is, yes, a set of values that come from a Judeo-Christian heritage, but the defining characteristic is anyone is welcome as long as you imbibe those values. Anyone is welcome as long as you don't have to be white. And I think that's the good part of multiculturalism. But what we've done in the West is that we've said, no, don't worry about our values. You're all welcome. And in fact, what has to happen is we have to bend over backwards to accommodate to you. And I think that's what the alt-right part of it's in response to. But I would say I think it's a bad movement and you shouldn't associate yourself with it.
Okay, fantastic. Now,
if you're not
no worries. So how would you describe your own political position? So where would you put yourself on the political spectrum?
Well, the political compass test.
Yeah.
So you've got left, right, and you've got libertarian, authoritarian, basically.
Yes.
I would be right of center and libertarian leaning.
Okay, fantastic. So sort of more of a classical liberal, believes in free economies and people should be able to pretty much do what they want within reason.
Yeah. Yep. Small government, free speech, cut tax rates, let people get on with it, no red tape. But I'm socially progressive, so I don't care. I mean, gay people want to get married, go for your life. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I don't have those sort of. So I probably would fall into the category of a fiscal conservative, but I'm definitely not socially conservative.
Okay, fantastic. So just to finish up, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the media in the future?
Well, I mean, number one, I guess, would be, and this is not up for debate really, it's just fact. It's fact. It's a fact given the things I've referenced before about the lack of trust in media. And this is the same here in Australia, is the media has to win back the trust of the public. Otherwise, you're going to see more fracturing of not only society, the political spectrum. You're going to have people going, whether it's Pauline Hanson or whether it's Cory Bernardi or something like that, that's what's going to happen. People are going to become more fractured. They're not getting what they want for the politicians, and the media is largely just reflecting what the politicians are saying. So if you're just reflecting what the politicians are saying, then you're not going to appeal to those disaffected people either. And I wonder how many people like myself, in the last election, I held my nose and voted for the Liberals, even though I don't like Malcolm Turnbull. I don't really like what he stands for, but the alternatives are just worse. So even, okay, you can say something like a third of the population is not voting for the two major parties, but then there's probably people voting for the major parties who are just doing so because they don't like any of the alternatives. So I think that, the media has to restore faith in itself, and I don't know how it does that unless it gets back to objective, fact-based reporting.
Fantastic. So, I mean, I just want to expand on one little point there. You mentioned trust in the media. Now, the ABC, they do still have quite a lot of trust from people. Now, they are the most trusted news source in the country. Why do you think that is? I mean, it's pretty clear to anyone who isn't of the left that they do lean left. I mean, they've
Well,
done.
I would say you probably need to have a closer look at those numbers.
Yeah.
One thing that came out recently was that the ABC's viewership is going down, and there was some changes made. Michelle Guthrie came out last week and announced they're going to fire some people.
Yep.
I think 100 jobs or 200 jobs, was it? I'm not sure. And then they were going to try and concentrate on some more regional programming. So they're trying to change up, but to me, they're still not addressing the key problem where there's a lack of diversity. I mean, there's probably not one conservative in the whole ABC building. But the ABC, my point about have a closer look at the numbers, I would suggest to you that the people who trust the ABC tend to be older and who grew up with it and who watch it a lot. People like my parents in their 60s. And I'd say as you go to a younger and younger demographic, less people watch the ABC and less people trust it. And that's their real problem, because the old people are going to die. And that's the way it goes. It's so they have to appeal to a younger demographic, but they aren't addressing their ideological diversity. They're just, the stupid stunt they did last week by replacing all the males with females, which basically sent the message that, well, here's a bunch of females that aren't good enough to get on TV and radio 364 days of the year, so we'll just put them on for one day. Ridiculous things like that. They still want to play identity politics, and I think that's going to be to their detriment. I mean, even if they could just make the gesture of, say, having a conservative on hosting a show on something, a current affairs show or something, and bringing a different perspective.
Just to get some real diversity, not just the way people look or what's between their legs, the way they think.
Exactly, because that kind of diversity doesn't actually count.
Yeah, true.
But viewpoint diversity actually does count.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I totally agree. Now, thank you very much. I really do appreciate the interview. Thank you very much for speaking to me and taking the time out of your day to have a chat.
No worries, mate.
Excellent.
Good one.